Welcome everybody to student orientation for Herring, Hawk, and Horse Practicum. We're so excited. Yay! It's a fun and busy time for you over the next several weeks, but hopefully it'll be good busy instead of crazy busy. So we're going to go through some information about orientation tonight. As I had mentioned before starting recording, feel free to share any questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute and ask any questions along the way. And of course, regardless of whether it's during our meeting or not, feel free to ask anything that comes to mind that you need help with throughout the course. Okay, so the first thing I like to highlight is practicum structure. This will be a little bit of a recap, like I had mentioned from our information session, but for the React and Node students, graduates coming out of those classes form teams of about 3 React students, 2 Node students, although we had a lot of dual enrollers this time around, so some of you have sort of this fun little combination of skills and abilities across all 5 or 6 students in your team. We also have some students returning to us from previous practicums just to be able to keep skills sharp while they're looking for work and doing all kinds of good stuff. So it's excellent to have so many people engaged and involved. But in general, you will have a group of X number of students, and each group will have at least one mentor assigned to them. If your mentor is familiar with both React and Node, then you will likely have one mentor plus or minus an apprentice assistant to kind of help them out with things. Or you might have 2 mentors, one that focuses on React, one that focuses on Node. So your mentorship for your team might look different from team to team. If there's ever any lack of mentorship that you feel in your team, then please let Frank and I know, so that way we can be sure that your team is getting the support that it needs to be able to progress through the practicum. For the Ruby on Rails folks, same kind of a thing. Graduates coming out of that class are just unto themselves as far as Ruby on Rails. You don't have another class's graduates that you're mingling with. 3 to 5 students to a team in those, and each of you will have individual mentors at minimum of your teams as well too. Any questions about structure so far? I feel like it's pretty clear, but
All good over here.
okay, awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so I like to highlight some of the primary goals. Like, what is the whole purpose? Why are we doing this practicum? What are you supposed to get out of this thing, right? Because I mean, you just took a 18-week course on whatever your particular framework is. So what are we doing this for? We are here to be able to build on your learning. So feel free to explore and stretch out of your comfort zone. Like, you're already a React graduate, you're already a Node graduate. Are there other tools and things that work with Ruby on Rails or React or Node that are sort of a tangent but related that you'd like to take a look at? So it's totally fine for Ruby on Rails students, for example, if there's a gem that you didn't explore or use in class or in your final project that you want to incorporate in the final project and it makes, or in the practicum project, and it makes sense to do that, then yeah, go for it. It's okay to take the initiative and start exploring things on your own and getting curious about what's out there related to what you've learned. The biggest goal is the 3 C's: cooperate, collaborate, communicate. When you are working remotely, and even if you aren't working remotely, but when you're working on a team of developers, knowing who's doing what and being clear on what you're supposed to be doing and how that fits into what other things that other people are doing is really helpful to make a good team experience. So cooperate with one another, collaborate with one another. And the biggest part is communicate. If there's going to be an interruption of you doing what the team has said, okay, I'm taking on this. If that is going to get waylaid or, off the tracks a little bit, then be sure that you are letting your teammates know, letting your mentors know about any kind of changes that might be happening. If there's an area you're struggling with, please say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I could use some help. Can somebody kind of help guide me so I can wrap my head around this and do what I've been tasked and do it well? Or if you're like, hey, I'm done with stuff, can I help somebody? Then please do so. Many hands make light work, I think is how the phrase goes. So always good to do. We are hoping that you're going to be learning about workflow process. So up to this point, you've probably been working on your own code base for some of you. And all of a sudden, you're going to have to touch a code base that other people are working on too. And there'll be bits and pieces of code that you didn't write, but you have to get yourself familiar with that, kind of like how you would have done in any of the debugging exercises in intro or your advanced classes. So, getting comfortable with a workflow process, getting comfortable with working on code that you didn't write are really going to be helpful goals to get out of this experience. For anybody that's new to sort of the general tech industry workflow process of Agile, Scrum, and stand-ups, those will be used. So in class, you were seeing week by week lessons. In the practicum, then you will see sprints, which are 2 week long periods. So during that 2 week period, there'll be certain aspects or parts of building the project that you'll be focused on, either as an end, as an individual, or as a team. And so those will be things that you'll be thinking about and working on over that 2 week period. Every week when you meet, then you'll have sort of recap meetings. Who's gotten how far with their task? Were there any issues? Do we need to pivot because of any delays? Can we add on more features because we finished things early? That kind of a thing. So getting comfortable with that sort of iterative workflow process of what's done, what needs to be done, what can we do now is going to be really helpful to pick up on. You'll get some exposure to some project management tools like GitHub projects, Trello. If you've never heard of a Kanban board, you will learn about Kanban boards. Basically, it's just an organized way of saying this person is assigned this task, and this task is either in a not yet started, in the process of being done, needs review, completed, deployed kind of phase. So it's a convenient visual way to know who's doing what pieces and at what part of the process of getting that piece done are they. Um, You'll learn about how projects are managed from concept through build, through testing, through deployment, as well as merge conflicts. So hopefully you haven't run into too many, if any, merge conflicts working on your own code base up to this point. If you have, that's totally okay. That just means you've already seen what others will see because merge conflicts are inevitable when you have multiple people working on the same code base. So you'll get to see what those look like, how they're handled, how to kind of process through those. You will either be doing code review, like peer code review, and or you'll see how that's demonstrated. You'll also demo your work. So just like the final project presentations you did, you'll be demoing your work towards the middle to end of January. And so now you'll get to work together as a team and you can all feel nervous about giving a presentation together as opposed to just you yourself feeling nervous about giving a presentation. But in reality, you don't need to feel nervous at all because, I mean, how awesome were the final projects? Which, by the way, I should have the link up to you later tonight for all of your final projects. At the end, complete and deploy a simple app. Keyword here being simple. Please don't feel like you have to reinvent the internet with the app that you're creating. It's okay for it to just be user, log in, do a thing. That's okay. It does not have to be this huge undertaking. And you can also prep for and start your job search during this practicum period too. So the last 2 weeks of your practicum at the very tail end of January, then we'll be giving you some tools for your little career development toolboxes as far as getting comfortable with job searching, how to market yourself, things to kind of be aware of and to practice to be a good potential candidate for things. Any questions up to this point about goals? We'll still be digging into some more nitty gritty later too, but
I have a question of when we will have presentation, which date?
yes, I do not have a finalized date on it yet, Virginia. It should be somewhere around January 20th to the 22nd. The reason we don't have a finalized date yet with the last practicum, we did it on a Friday night, and it was a really great experience. But I think most everybody that was in attendance were current students, current mentors, and we'd really like for you to be able to present to people beyond your own little comfort bubble. So we're going to pick a day or night, probably, of the week that hopefully Code the Dream staff and or apprentices can attend as well too. So that way you can show off how awesome you are. Once we have the finalized date and time, then I will share that, and we should have it, I would think, within another week or two. We should be able to nail down that date and time more specifically. Any other questions before I keep rolling? Cool. Okay, so practicum curriculum. If you have not already, you likely will very soon be able to see the practicum curriculum in the Learns app as either Horse Hawk Practicum or Herring Practicum. You'll notice some similarities, you'll notice some differences. So you are still using the classes.codethedream.org Learns app to be able to access your weekly content. And the time commitment should be about the same too. So we say on average 10 to 20 hours a week. If you're spending a lot less than 10 hours or a lot more than 20 hours on your project from week to week, you really need to be talking to your team about that because either they aren't giving you enough or you aren't taking on enough responsibilities or you've taken on too much or it's a bigger task than what any of you anticipated it to be. So definitely communicate about how much time you're spending as well as what you're comfortable doing so that way you can kind of balance the workload and make sure that everybody is growing together since that is one of our values here at Code the Dream is growth. So we want to make sure that everybody is growing. Ways that it's going to be different from class is less structure. So we don't know what you're building. So it makes it hard to build a curriculum that says, okay, now add a form to your to-do list because you might not be doing a to-do list. It's whatever your team decides you want to build. So for that reason, it's less structure, but you will still have objectives for your team, for your stack. So either React or Node, or Ruby on Rails, there'll be particular sort of like points in building a project progress that you should be hitting at certain points throughout the practicum, as well as objectives for yourself. So as a team, you decide, okay, person A is going to work on this, person B is going to work on this, person C is going to work on this. And those are three different things. So you'll have objectives for yourself for tasks that you should be doing, as well as things that you should be doing to contribute to the team. Um, you will have a little bit more of a regular schedule, hopefully, that'll mimic sort of a part-time real world work situation. You're going to have bi-weekly sprints. So the way the lesson pages are structured is sprint one, sprint two, sprint three, sprint four. Each sprint is 2 weeks. So you'll have a week one, sprint one, and you'll have a week two, sprint one, for example. So you'll work through those and you'll have weekly meetings to check in with everybody on your team, mentors and teammates alike, to be able to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what's been done, what needs to be done. Do we need to make any revisions to our plan as we kind of iterate through the different parts that we're building of our project?
Okay.
You'll be
What is
collaborating.
a
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
what's a sprint?
Oh, sure. So a sprint is just a term used within the tech industry that is defining a period of time when you're focusing on a particular feature or aspect. So it's used, for example, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain it as far as like you might have a sprint where you're focusing strictly on like user experience improvements where you're putting more in, putting iconography in to be able to have users have a better visual experience of knowing, okay, this button does this because I recognize the little envelope button to be an email button. So it'll be focusing on a particular aspect of something is how it's used within the industry. For you all,
Okay.
it will be particular like periods that you focus on. So your first sprint is really going to be about project setup, project design. So getting your concept finalized and having an idea of, okay, is there going to be a user login page? What will that look like? What will that then take the user to once they log in? And sort of understanding the progress and sort of the layout of what you're building. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So it's like you're just like working on like allotted chunks, like focusing on one thing at a time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
And when you're in the industry and doing sprints, then they tend to be sort of iterative to where it'll be like, okay, at the end of a sprint, let's look back. What did we accomplish? Okay, what does our next sprint need to focus on then? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Great questions. I love the questions. You can always bring on the questions. So collaborating is the last part that's going to be different. You were working on your own code base, building your own project, and now you're going to have other people touching your code. You're going to be touching other people's code. It's going to be a free-for-all. No, it's not actually a free-for-all. It's really fun. But it's challenging at first because you know what you built, you know where you wrote what you built, you're comfortable with what you're doing. And so it does take a little growth mindset to be able to adapt to, okay, I haven't seen this code before. I need to look at it and understand what it's doing. And I need to talk to the person who built it if I don't understand what it's doing. And then we can kind of collaborate. And then I know what I have to do that then connects to this piece. For that reason, if you're stuck on a problem, reach out to teammates because your teammate probably built what you might have a question about. And they might be able to help you out with anything that you're running into as far as understanding, like, okay, you built it this way, it's doing this, and the piece that I need to build has to use these pieces as well. Do you need to restructure what you did so that I can also use some of that data for the part that I have to build? Lots of things of that variety. So don't let yourself be stuck on something for a really long time because it might slow down the progress of other people who are building things that are dependent on what you're doing as well too. It can be a little tricky in practicum, kind of getting used to this. Oh yeah, it's not just me in my own little bubble writing my code. Um, People will have to work on what I've worked on, and I'll have to work on other people's code as well too, and get comfortable with all of that. And then, of course, the career prep weeks are completely different from anything that was in any of your lessons, but it'll be good and it'll be fun, unless you're a really, really strong in introvert, and then yikes. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the career prep weeks, it's the first practicum. No, it's the second practicum. I forgot to update the slide. The last practicum was the first one doing career prep weeks. But with these, it becomes a 10-week total process. You all are actually 12 weeks because you have 2 holiday weeks. But during those holiday weeks, there isn't any expectation of work being done. So those final 2 weeks from middle of January to January 31st are going to be career prep. You'll read and do some activities that are related to job search and applying for jobs. You're going to meet with your team. So just like you're doing a weekly team meeting to talk about your code and your project, weeks 9 and 10, you'll still meet with your team on that weekly meeting, but instead of talking code and building code, then you'll review the activities that you did and discuss those topics within your little group. You will also have a meeting on weeks 9 and weeks 10 with either Frank and or Lillian. That's everybody in Practicum gets together into one great big call for anybody that can attend. Hopefully everybody will be able to attend. And that way you can have a big group discussion about those topics related to applying, technical interviews, behavioral interviews, how to best represent yourself online or in a portfolio, all of that good stuff. If you are applying for the apprenticeship, then you will also practice and take a coding assessment as a part of the apprenticeship, as a part of the apprenticeship application process. So if you are intending to apply for the apprenticeship at the end of practicum, then we will email out those assessments for you after the end of practicum. So February 1st will be the day that you'll get the email saying, here's the assessment. You have 2 weeks to be able to complete it. More details on those in just a minute. But I also want to highlight some of the tools that you'll be using. Oh, sorry. I had a little kink in my back. Okay. The Learns app, as I had already mentioned, is something you're already familiar with that you'll be using. I am going to pop over to, oh wait, no, hold on. I needed to just hop out of here real quick. So on the dashboard, for the herring practicum, hawk and horse, you'll also have it as well too. Just like what you're used to as far as lesson weeks, select the lesson week to see whatever the content is for that particular week. For horse and hawk folks, React and Node folks, your learning objectives will be broken out by front-end team should be doing this week, back-end team should be doing this week to give you a good idea of kind of what's going on. As well as letting you know, like, as a team, this is what you should be doing. The Welcome to Practicum page, I presume you all should have access to this. If for some reason you don't have access to this on your dashboards, please ping me on Slack and let me know so I can make sure everything's correct on the back end that gets you access to this information. But feel free to go ahead and take a look at the Welcome to Practicum anytime between now and the 11th. There's no assignments to do or anything of that variety, and there's nothing you ever have to submit and turn in because all of it is going to be just the code work that you're doing on your project. So you don't have to worry about submitting anything to us. But yeah, feel free to kind of read through to just get yourself familiar with anything that would be of use. And then the career weeks are down here at the bottom in career prep. And so there's a topic on mindset and then a topic on branding. And that'll cover all of the information that you need as far as, how do I network and tell me about recruiters and all of that good stuff. Okay. So LearnZap, primary resource for making sure that you're checking the boxes of what you need to be doing as you're progressing through building your project, but definitely use your other tools as well too. So GitHub, you're familiar with, you've been doing your projects in that. You will still be using GitHub for your repositories. Code the Dream will build the starter repositories for React and Node, and we'll have an empty starter repository for the Ruby on Rails teams, one repository for each of the Ruby on Rails teams, a front repository and a back repository for each of the React Nodes teams. Your mentors will be able to help guide you through how to use them, what you're doing with all of those good things, and get you comfortable with permissions and all of that good stuff. As we build out these repositories, you will get an email saying you're invited to be a collaborator on front end repository team 3, back end repository team 3, whatever. So watch your email. When you get an email that says you're invited to be a collaborator, accept it. Otherwise, it will be the end of sprint 1 and you'll be like, where is all of our code? What is going on? So when you get the email, please accept that you are going to be a collaborator on that project. This is something completely new from anything you've done in classes. But repositories can have particular users given certain permissions on what they can and can't do within the repository. They are called collaborators. So that's what that is happening with that. Slack you'll still be using for communication. You each have your own team channels. We have the All Practicum channel there as well too. So keep an eye on that for any announcements. Use your team channels to be able to communicate about things. As you're getting things set up in your first sprint, then your mentors and or you all might decide on particular workflows that will work best for your team. We can have GitHub pull requests and updated branches alerts pop up within Slack. But it can also kind of clutter your conversation feed. So if your team decides that you want to have a separate channel just for those GitHub announcements and alerts, then just let Frank or I know, or have your mentors let Frank or I know, and we can get the secondary team channel set up for your GitHub announcements. Zoom, the Zoom that we are on right now will also be a recurring meeting setup. So anytime you all either need or want to jump on for front-end meetings, back-end meetings, pair programming, team meetings, then it's available. We will be creating a schedule so that way you can indicate when your team or parts of your team are meeting on the Zoom channel. And that way we'll know like when it's occupied, when it's not occupied. It's totally fine for multiple teams to be on it at the same time. We just need to make sure that the mentors of those teams have the host key so that we can do breakout rooms and like team 3 can be in one breakout room while team 7's in another or whatever. So those will be a lot of the sort of organizational tools that you'll use. There are some optional things that your team might elect to use, like Figma or Canva or other wireframing type of devices for designing the overall concept of the project. You might use Google Drive to be able to share files. So if you're putting in like some dummy data or you wanted to have some images to use for graphics or things like that, there's all kinds of extra tools that may or may not be used for your project depending on what you all decide and or what your mentors think would be helpful given the project that you all want to build. Feel free to reach out to mentors, classmates, if there's more information or resources that you need to understand any of the tools that your team decides to use. Okay, questions up to this point? I'm gonna take a break and drink some water and see.
I have a question
Yeah,
about GitHub. So we don't need to create our own repos and to manage them, or we
correct.
can, like, if we want.
You Can if you want to, but the repositories should be built on Code the Dream School. That way we can kind of easily see the commit history and there isn't that awkward like, okay, so-and-so needs to try and add their classmates as collaborators and kind of walking through that process. And it's a little bit closer to mimicking real world because a project that you work on for a company, you aren't going to own. The company's going to own that project. They're going to
Yeah,
own.
like under an
Yeah,
organization. Yeah, I understand. But
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, like
So for that
about the
reason, that's why we
history,
usually set
like
up the repos for you. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering because about the history, I can just force push
Yeah.
and rewrite the history. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It will be under organization or just a private account.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Other questions hanging out there? Okay. Okay, so roles and expectations. We definitely expect you to keep with the values of Code the Dream. So inclusion, community, growth, and impact are the 4 pillar values of Code the Dream. Make sure that you're supporting one another, being inclusive and welcoming of new ideas or suggestions that teammates have about how to problem solve or ideas for designs or things like that. Um, have that sense of community and make sure that you're communicating within your little community of your team regularly so that way everybody's on the same page. Help foster your own growth, like as far as advocate for yourself of, hey, I'd like to take on something that's a little bit more challenging. Can I try that? As well as encouraging your teammates to grow as well too. You know, there's always that old adage of you're only as strong as your weakest link. Fortify your weakest link then. So help each other out, strengthen each other, and that's how you get a really good strong team. Okay, so the expectations are complete the assigned tasks. Who assigns those tasks? It might be the mentor early on, and then it might be sort of agreed upon by the team as you go on and get more comfortable in sort of those workflow processes. But whatever's assigned to you, then be working on that project. So whether it's, you know, building out a login page or creating some testing or whatever the case may be, work on those tasks, refer to resources, reach out for help when needed. Communicate regularly. I can't say that enough, but communicate regularly. If you're sick, let people know. If you are, you know, on vacation coming up, let people know. It doesn't have to be like a let me share my personal business with everybody, as long as you're at least letting your mentor know, so that way they're aware of the situation and can kind of help shuffle workload to other people while you're dealing with whatever's going on. That's really important. Attend your group weekly meetings. Be supportive, encouraging, those 4 pillars that I was talking about. Treat this as a dress rehearsal. So have that same level of professionalism as far as, you know, attend meetings on time, don't show up late, use appropriate and professional language when speaking with one another, all of that kind of environment. Pretend you're already hired and in a job and you're treating it as such. So that way it gets you kind of in that familiarity already. As a reminder, we expect it should be 10 to 20 hours a week. If you're spending more or less time than that, you should be talking with your team so that way things can be distributed evenly. And or you can get support or additional tasks as needed. Okay, so what are your mentors there for? Your mentors are going to be the voice of experience that helps guide you because they will have seen projects built, they will have built projects themselves on teams to be able to say, this is not doable within the 8-week period that you all have, or okay, this is a great idea. Let's do this on a smaller scale because of the time commitment that we have. So they'll be helping kind of guide you along as far as that goes. They should be in attendance at your weekly meetings. They should be able to help you with issues, and the help might look different. Maybe it's, hey, the other teammate is really great at that. The two of you should connect and work on that together. Or it might be, yeah, let's get together so I can help you through this area that you're struggling with. Or it might be, here's some resources. You should check these resources out and kind of self-study on these topics to be able to get comfortable with those, and we can talk about questions that you have. So how a mentor helps in practicum might look different depending on the mentor, depending on what it is that you need help with, but they should be assisting you in some way, shape, or form and supporting the group and supporting that you all are supporting and helping each other as well too. If you have mentors that are non-communicative without telling you, like if they're just not responding and they didn't say, hey, I'm going to be out for the weekend or anything like that, then Frank or I need to know. So that way we are aware of what's going on and can get you the support that you do need. Things do come up, things happen. So it's important that we're aware. There was a question in the chat about, who distributes tasks among members? Thank you, Will. In the beginning, the mentors will likely be helping heavily with distributing those tasks. So between now and the start of Practicum, it's helpful for you to kind of have an idea of what do I feel really confident in and what do I not feel confident in? So that way they can help gauge who should be doing what. It's not always going to go to the person who's most confident in a particular task. Sometimes it's more important to give a task to somebody who's kind of, I feel a little gray on this, to help them get the skill level that they need. So give some thought as far as like, do I feel comfortable testing? Do I feel comfortable with CSS? Do I feel comfortable with component usage? And do I understand state? Things of that variety. For Ruby, understanding how all the bits and pieces get together, how to properly query and or pass data back and forth. So think about the different aspects and where you felt good and where maybe you feel a little uncertain are always helpful things to kind of have in the back of your mind. But yeah, initially the mentors will be helping guide that along in the early stages. And then as your team kind of gets more comfortable and gets your feet under you, then the team can probably decide who goes with what. Yeah, great questions. I love it when people have great questions. Thank you all. Okay, so this is just an example work week. I don't want you all to think that this is a hard and fast schedule that I'm sharing here. This definitely can fluctuate. And that's where communication is really key in Practicum. Talk amongst yourselves as far as what's doable, what's not doable. So if you're wanting to treat this as a Monday to Friday kind of a job, then this is potentially what it would look like. But all of you are coming out of classes that your work week was Wednesday to Tuesday. So with probably a lot of your work happening on Saturdays and Sundays. So if your week looks different, that's okay. It's all right for your week to look different. But in general, you should have 4 or 5 days in your week that you're planning, okay, I'm going to be working on tasks for Practicum on these days. Just like with class, you'd have a few days where you're like, I'm working on lesson materials, a few days I'm working on coding assignments. So same kind of idea as far as having multiple days that you're going to be regularly working on things. And then your meeting day would be the equivalent of the day that you were going to attend your group session or your one-on-one session. So the meeting day is when everybody's going to get together. Plan to be in attendance for that. Things will come up and that's okay. Talk to your teammates as far as like, can we record it? Can somebody take notes and pass me notes once it's done? But the expectation is attend weekly meetings every week, unless there's some major thing that has occurred. That's why I have the weekends, ? Continue on tasks. If you yourself decide I want to work on my practicum stuff more and you want to do it on other days outside of sort of this agreed upon, this is when people will be available and checking in kind of time frame, then that's totally fine. But also know that whatever the agreed upon expectation is from the team is the expectation. So don't feel like you have to go above and beyond. Don't feel like you need to take on more, but make sure that you're kind of well balancing yourself throughout the week. Hopefully that's helpful. I feel like I rambled and got a little vague there. Okay. So as I had mentioned, for repositories, Horse and Hawk, each team's going to have 2 repositories, creating Code the Dream School GitHub account, one for front, one for back. And you'll get links to those this weekend. There was a question that popped up. Yes, that is totally fine to do as far as anything that you all have decided on as a team, as you've been forming teams and kind of brainstorming ideas. Totally fine to share any and all of that information with your mentors as soon as your mentors are in the channel. So feel free to share any documents or thoughts, notes, anything that you have come up with up to this point. So that way they can kind of catch up to speed with where your all's brains and coding fingers have been. Okay. Herring. So we've given the option before to use a classmates project as the basis for your Ruby on Rails practicum project. You are still welcome to do that, but it does have sort of complications as far as either pushing, as Anton had mentioned earlier, pushing everything over to Code the Dream School, or creating collaborators within your individual repository to give people permission settings on that code base. But regardless, one repository is what'll be structured most likely for Herring, unless your team decides to do like a React front end or something. If you need any kind of structures built or adjusted, permissions given, anything like that, feel free to reach out to Frank or I so we can get those things set up. The mentors are going to oversee your repositories, so they'll have admin access on those. But anytime there's like merge conflicts being handled, or if you have questions about why are we structuring branches this way, or what are those permission settings and who has them and what does that mean, definitely talk to your mentors about that. In our mentor orientation, we had told them that that kind of information is helpful for you all since it might be the first time that you're seeing that. So we encourage them to share as much information about the why beyond just what are we doing, why are we doing it this way. The biggest thing that is going to be a huge difference that you all will need to be aware of is you will not fork anything in Practicum. You do not need to fork any repositories. If you fork a repository, it's going to make your own personal copy of the project that's being built, which, that's fine to do at the very end if you'd like to have your own personal copy of everything that was built that you all did throughout Practicum. Great. But you'll clone the repository because the work that you'll be doing needs to get pushed back to that repository. This isn't make a copy of blank workbook-esque repositories to be able to work on your coding assignments. This is the project. Clone the repository for the project because you're going to be working on that directly. We want that code base to change as you all are contributing to it and building out your features. So clone, don't fork. Put your forks down. Wonderful. Okay, you do definitely need to work on separate branches. So if throughout class you had any troubles or struggles with remembering to branch off, remembering to do the pull origin main or whatever before you started your next project, anything like that, definitely get yourself comfortable with Git and Git workflow. Definitely remember to branch off of your updated main or deployment or whichever is your sort of working branch. Branch off of that to be able to do your work. Otherwise, you'll have all kinds of fun merge conflicts that you have to deal with. Okay, I like to give a visual so that way it helps kind of process things because sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around like, okay, who's doing what, where with branches and what's happening. So for React Node, you'll have a front-end repository represented by this orange area, a back-end repository represented by the yellow area. You will pull down from main whenever main gets updated, or whatever branch is sort of your staging or your kind of your primary focal point. But you'll pull down to make sure that it's updated, do a working branch, do your work, push back up. Smaller, more frequent commits are going to really make it easier to unravel any merge conflicts that happen. So commit often. Don't write 300 lines of code and then commit after that. Write a little snippet, get it working, make sure it's good, commit that. Write the next little bit, commit, and so on. It helps untangle things that way. But so each individual student should pull down from main every time it's updated, build off of your working branch, do your work, push it back up. Same thing on the back end as far as pull down to make sure that you have the most current recent version of all of the code base, branch off, get your work done, go ahead and push it back up. For Ruby on Rails, same kind of thing, only it's all one repository. So pull down from main, branch off, get your work done, push it up. Hopefully those visuals helped a little bit if anybody's visual like I am. Okay, so we had talked about sprints earlier with Stu's question. This is just definitions on these terms to get you comfortable with it. There's not going to be any quiz or test. It's just a way to kind of conceptualize what these words that people are throwing around means. So agile, when you hear people talk about an agile workflow or an agile process, it's just an iterative approach. So it's build a hamburger, taste test the hamburger. Does it taste great? No, let's add some cheese to this. Oh, okay. Go back to building the hamburger, add the cheese in, make sure the cheese is all there and proper, taste it. How's it tasting? Okay, it's good. Iterative approach. Go back, add some ketchup. So that's what that agile means, is just this iterative approach of taking a look back, what worked, what didn't work, let's fix what needs to be fixed, and kind of keep rotating through. Works in small, manageable increments of work. So you're not changing it from a hamburger to a chicken salad. You're just taking that hamburger and making small adjustments to get it to be the perfect one. Okay, sprints in Practicum is a 2-week period where teams are focused on a specific feature. In industry, then it's the same kind of idea, but it's going to be focusing on those small, manageable increments of work. This sprint, we will get XYZ bug fixes in and make these user experience improvements or whatever, just as an example. Scrum is the term for short daily meetings, just to identify each team member's progress on their tasks, identify blockers, and kind of keep the momentum going. For a lot of you, this will likely just be asynchronous in your Slack channels. How you and your mentors decide to do this is totally fine. Just let us know, so that way if we need to set in any reminders or anything for your Slack channels, we can do that. But it's good to regularly, it doesn't necessarily have to be daily, but it's good to regularly check in with everybody as far as, this is what I'm working on, this is what's keeping me from making progress on what I'm working on, this is what I've already completed. So that way there's clear communication happening within the team as far as, oh, that's done? Okay, good. That means I can start my part now. Or, oh, you're stuck on that? I can't get to this until you're done with it, so let me help you with that. It's all about kind of teamwork and helping each other. Okay, so for the merge conflict, for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, it's when multiple people working on the same code base create code that conflicts with one another. So in an index.js file, line 5 has something different in the main copy than in the copy that's trying to be merged into the main copy. And a computer isn't going to know which one you want because it can't read minds, or can it? And so that's where merge conflicts come in. It'll say, these are the 2 copies I have. Which one do you want? Which one are we keeping? So it's just sort of a check and balance system. For that reason, to help avoid conflicts is to pull locally after each pull request gets merged. So pulling down main, making sure that the code base you start with is the most recent version. Do your work on a separate branch, and then doing those small, more frequent changes are going to help. Merge conflicts are inevitable. They're okay. It doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong. It's just the nature of the beast. And so it's important to be able to see what they are, how they're handled, how to process through them, why they happen, all of those good things. So those will be things that you'll be learning throughout. Whew. Questions up to this point? Sorry I'm yammering so much, y'all.
Yeah, I have one. I didn't catch that approach with working on the like someone's from students project under that students repository. So do we need to continue to work there, or do we need to transfer that students repository under Code Dreams organization?
Yeah.
How it works?
I think it'll be a case-by-case basis, Anton. So if your team decides that one of the 3 of you in your team, that you all are wanting to build on that project that started, then that is totally fine. And we can either have your mentor for your team kind of walk you through the process of being able to add collaborators, or we can also just set up that blank repository. You can push all of the content from that repository that you all are using as your jumping off point into the Code the Dream School one. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis on it.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Does that help, or am I still causing confusion?
Yeah, like, yep, actually help. We can just talk to mentor and decide what to do. So yeah, it helps.
Okay, perfect. Good. As long as we know that there's a game plan in place, then that's good.
Yeah. Like,
Awesome. All right. Okay. So, what happens now? Decide among your group day and time that you'll meet each week. Definitely share that with me in Slack. That's going to help us confirm that the mentors that we're sort of earmarking for you, if you did not have mentorship coming into it, works with the day and time for when you're intending to meet. So definitely share those days and times of your intended weekly meeting as soon as you're able to. Yeah, go ahead, Irina.
Marielis, I have a very, very interesting question. So I don't know, it's important to know. I
Okay.
know that general students, for example, Node.js students has two breaks, Thanksgiving break and winter break.
Yeah.
In our uh, sprints,
Yeah.
I don't find any information about these
Oh,
breaks. And
you know,
one question, mentor in these breaks will be available or it just like
yes.
reduce our,
Yeah,
oh,
no, you'll
okay.
definitely have those breaks for sure. I'm glad you brought that up, Irina. I
But
think the
but
reason
it will be great if winter break will be present in practicum also. For example,
100%.
Thanksgiving break it's okay, but
Yeah,
winter break it's like must have to be.
exactly.
Yeah, so
I completely understand.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the reason it doesn't show up in your curriculum is because you all don't have like due dates for your assignments because you aren't turning in assignments to us. So I think that's why it doesn't wind up showing up on your all's calendars in the Learns app. But yeah, so for November, the 25th to the 29th, that week, you all can plan to just step back, take a break, enjoy family. And then December gets a little trickier. So again, this is where communication is going to be key. There may be more in a group that celebrate a different holiday in December. And so if there's a week earlier in December that you all are like, most of us celebrate XYZ holiday instead, then that's okay for you all to decide that week we're all taking a holiday that week. If in general you want to plan to be like the 24th to the 31st kind of time frame is the week that you take off, that's totally okay too. So talk to your teammates as far as when people will not be available for holidays. Find your commonalities so that way people are aware of when they should not be working on things because they won't have teammates to help with or that kind of thing. Does that help, Arena?
Yeah, so first of all, mentor in this period will be available for help or
Possibly. So the
possible.
mentors were made aware that there are 2 weeks during the whole start to finish time period that are those holiday weeks. And the general idea is that the week of Thanksgiving and then that final week of December will be when people can step back, focus on self, focus on families, and take some time away from classes for that period of time. I did let them know in the mentor orientation that they need to be clear with you all as well, as far as this is when I am available, this is when I'm not available around the holidays. But it shouldn't be more than the week around Thanksgiving, the week around end of year.
Okay, and is it means that you will like add 1 week for example, winter break to our like curriculum or no?
So it's already worked out that way. Like
Yeah.
calendar wise, you all are over 12-week period, even though it's 10 weeks of curriculum. Does that make sense?
Oh, maybe I think
Unless I'm counting wrong. Hold on, let me look at my calendar,
uh,
double check. One, two,
yeah,
three.
it's because
Four.
when I open my course about hiring practicum and I don't see here any informations about any breaks, especially for winter breaks.
Yeah, yeah. So you're talking like the calendar along here. This is obviously the herring one,
Yeah,
where it doesn't show, a Thanksgiving break week or a winter break week at all.
no, Marilis, click please courses
Yep.
tab like yeah, like this, and you here have like a herring practicum, yeah, here. And when you
Oh,
open here, there is
I
no
got you.
information about. So we have like sprint week during winter break or something.
Yeah,
So it looks like
Thanksgiving.
we don't have any
I know.
breaks,
Yeah.
and it's
Ignore the dates.
yeah.
I'll work with Omer to be able to get those dates and things corrected for you all. But yeah, sprint two, week one of two would actually be the following week because the week of the 25th would be when Thanksgiving falls. And then this week here would probably be the other one where things would get pushed down. I'll work to get it corrected so it's less confusing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you told me that. And I'm glad we worked that out because, yeah, that was
And
confusing for me too.
oh, it's because very important. I like a mentor in not course, and I know that they have to like
Exactly. Yeah.
breaks.
It's
Yeah,
like, I know what the times are. Why are they not there?
yeah.
Perfect. I'm glad you brought it
Thank
up,
you. Thank
Serena.
you, Marian.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Okie dokie. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place by moving my mouse. Okay. So decide among your group about the day and time. Let us know when you all are intending. Make sure that your mentors can meet those days and times too. If you're doing just a front end only meeting and a back end only meeting for React and Node, decide on those. You don't have to necessarily report those to us, but make sure your mentors are aware of when that's happening and that they can attend if you're wanting them to attend as well. If you haven't yet, brainstorm ideas for your project or narrow it down to 1 or 2 ideas so that way your mentors can kind of help hone you in on what one will work for the time allotted. Look at that Welcome to Practicum page, and you can also preview the Sprint 1 Week 1 page too if you're wanting to take a look at that. Okay, let me make sure I haven't missed any questions in the chat real quick too. Okay, all right. So after Practicum, at the end of the first weeks, you'll complete a self-evaluation form, and the self-evaluation form is the apprenticeship application if you are applying for the apprenticeship. As a reminder, the apprenticeship is available for people with work authorization in the US. It's a 1-year offer with a 9-month minimum commitment, 40 hours a week. It's remote, so you don't have to physically be in North Carolina to do this. And it can be renewed for a 2nd year. It does have benefits, and it's a paid position, full-time paid position. So that's kind of the highlights of the apprenticeship. When you do the self-evaluation, you'll need to select apply for apprenticeship as your first choice for what do you want to do post-practicum. And that's how we know, okay, you are applying for the apprenticeship. You'll also complete team evaluation forms. So in addition to you taking a little bit of time and thinking about, okay, what was I comfortable with? What were areas I grew in? What are areas I need to strengthen? You'll also take a look at your teams. It's just sort of general areas as far as like, were they committed to the team? Did they take initiative? Do they seem pretty good in their technical skill level? That kind of a thing. And there are also open answer areas too, where you can say, this person was phenomenal. They did XYZ. I was so happy to have them as a team member. And an area too where you can say, it seemed like they really struggled with this. That would be a good area for them to be able to work on, to be able to improve either skills or techniques in that particular aspect. They don't see your specific, like, so-and-so said XYZ about me. These evaluation forms are just for Code the Dream staff to see and then kind of synthesize so that way if individuals are needing or wanting information about, hey, where am I good? Where do I need to strengthen? Then we have that information that we can take a look and see, okay, well, this is sort of the general consensus is you're late to meetings all the time. Just be on time for meetings or whatever. So that's all helpful information. For the application process, so you fill out your self-evaluation with your first choice saying, I want to apply for the apprenticeship program. And then from February 1st to the 16th is the period of time in which you will be able to take a technical assessment. Your score on the assessment doesn't matter per se because there's always sort of a bell curve. And it doesn't mean your score has to beat out other people's scores. There are a lot of aspects that we look at when we are interviewing people for the apprenticeship. Some of it is need-based, some of it is growth-based. So how much did you grow throughout your course and practicum? Some of it is interest-based. If you're wanting to build some amazing mega something or other for, a huge banking corporation, well, we're a nonprofit that builds social justice projects. So you're probably not going to feel too fulfilled building our projects. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into it as far as who's offered interview and who is accepted in the apprenticeship program. And even beyond all of that is the spaces that we have available. So depending on how many apprentices get hired out is determining how many spaces we have to fill. And there have been times, especially when there were a lot of tech job layoffs, that apprentices had no place to go to because people even more senior than they were getting laid off of jobs and were not finding work. And they were in the huge pool of people applying for jobs. And so there have been times when we haven't been able to take anybody. And then there have been times where we've had the fortune of being able to take on several. And it just really varies from practicum to practicum. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. It just ebbs and flows. And that also may play into it. So you might be an excellent apprentice candidate, but we might not be able to take you on because we don't have the space. So don't feel bad if the answer is no, and don't think that the answer being no means the answer is no from now until eternity. It could very well mean not right now, apply the next time. So things to keep in mind as far as what happens after practicum if apprenticeship is what you are looking for. And that's my last slide. Yay, you've survived hearing me talk at you for an hour. So questions, hit me with your questions, students.
I have one.
Yeah.
Uh, who is usually a driver, like I don't know, project manager, team lead, whatever, in on Practicum?
In practicum, typically the mentor serves as sort of the project manager or the product owner, as it were, of the practicum projects that's being built.
Mm-hmm. What if you don't have a mentor?
So if you don't have mentorship, then we need to know if that's something that your team is needing and wanting, and then we also need to know when your meeting times will be, so that way we can align mentorship with your team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
I think there were a couple of apprenticeship questions that popped up in the chat too. Let me just see and make sure that I hit on any of those that were reached out. Oh, requirements for the apprenticeship was one of the questions. So the requirements are complete an advanced class successfully, complete a practicum, apply for the apprenticeship using that self-evaluation form, and then take the technical assessment. After technical assessments are done, then Code the Dream Labs staff members evaluate your assessments, your progress through class, your final projects, your contributions through practicum, all of those kinds of aspects and features, and they send out interview offers to individuals that look like they would be good candidates. And then the interview is not a technical interview. It's more of just I guess I'd describe it as a behavioral interview, sort of, but it's not even really that necessarily. It's more let's get together, tell us what you want to get out of the apprenticeship. We can answer questions about the apprenticeship for you, and just get to know each other as far as, what are your professional goals and that kind of a thing. So that's sort of how that apprenticeship workflow flows. Hopefully that helps, Riska, but let me know if you still have additional questions about it. Oh, excellent question, Marcia. So if your meeting date is not November 11th and it's towards the end, like it's closer to November 14th, 15th, then during the first week, everybody should definitely be reading over Sprint 1, Week 1. And you can have asynchronous conversations to kind of help nail down some of your ideas a little bit more and just get yourselves organized for when that first meeting will happen later in the week, to make sure that you can make the most of that time together as far as sort of synthesizing down, okay, what are we building? What do we want the features to be on that? Because by the end of that first sprint is when you want to have the project idea finalized, some rough wireframing done, as well as have your MVPs, your minimum viable product. So the features that are must have, it has to have these items in order for it to be functional and do what we expect it to do, sort of outlined or organized. Yeah. If you can meet closer to the 11th, then great. If you can't, then that's okay too. If students and mentors need or want to meet later this week, like the 7th or the 8th, then that's also an option too, Marcia. Let's see here. There was a question about, oh, that's a great point, Will. I don't know that we've had any kind of demos of projects that CTD Labs has been building shared with practicum students, but that's a pretty cool idea. I might reach out to some of the project managers on lab side and see if they can, need, or want to either put together a short, like 5-minute demo video talking about their projects, or a lot of times they'll demo their work or progress of their work at different staff meetings that we have. So I could also piecemeal bits and pieces from those together to give you all some previews on that too. These are great questions. What else do we have question-wise that we need to answer?
And I have one more question about dates. We will finish in January plus 2 week. It's like near January 24 approximately. And
It'll be
then
closer to January 31st. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Gina.
like January 31st.
Yes, yeah.
And then we have dates from February 1st to 16. And what between? It's okay, January, okay, and February 1st. Yeah, understood.
Yeah. Yeah, so January 31st, unless Lillian or Frank change the date on that final career prep week meeting where everybody gets together, then January 31st will probably be when you meet for that week 10 final sort of career dev meeting together with like across teams. Everybody gets together for those for everybody that's available. And then anybody that applies for the apprenticeship, they would get the information and could start their assessment as early as February 1st. We like to try and give a 2-week period because life happens and sometimes you just need to schedule, engage, and find yourself 4 hours where you can sit down uninterrupted to be able to take your assessment, which is a big enough challenge in and of itself.
And why we need 2 week for assignment? It's a big assignment.
So no, it's a coding assessment that you take
Uh-huh.
online. It's going to have some coding challenges to it, depending on which one you're taking, whether it's for React, Ruby, or Node, then it might have some multiple choice questions. It might have coding challenges. It might have a couple of free answer questions in there as well, too. And this touches on the question Tracy had popped up in the chat as well too. Thank you for bringing that, Tracy. The assessments, if you have taken the assessment in a previous practicum, I don't think the assessments have or will be changed. So those of you who have taken it before, then you'll see the same kind of content. For those of you that are new to it, we'll be giving you a sample one to take that's just on JavaScript basics. And it's like, I don't know, 5 multiple choice questions and a coding challenge that's super simple, just so you can get comfortable with the site, how to use it, where to find everything on the site, all of that good stuff. But then the actual assessment will be available for you as well too. And like I'd said, depending on which you're doing, it will vary. I think React is a little more coding challenge based. The Node one, I think, is sort of partial coding challenge and partial multiple choice question. Ruby on Rails, I think, leans more heavily towards the multiple choice question and has a couple of coding challenges in that one as well too. Does that help? Does that answer questions?
I don't understand why we need 2 weeks for this.
Oh, so the assessment, when you start it, you have 4 hours from the time that you start it to complete it in its entirety. And so the coding challenges and multiple choice questions take roughly about 3 to 4 hours for students to be able to complete all of those. The coding challenges aren't like build an entire project from scratch. It would be like, here's starter code of a React component. You need to make it do this, or you need to utilize it in this way. And so there'll be parts of code that you write to achieve whatever that coding challenge is challenging you on. But we give you a 2-week period so that way you can take a look at your schedule in that 2-week period and make sure that you have a block of 4 hours where you can sit down uninterrupted. Sometimes that takes a little preparation in advance, especially for those of you that are parents and caregivers and in school yourselves or just working full time yourselves. So that's
Okay,
why there's that
understood.
2-week period. Yeah. Other questions? Hopefully, I've not overwhelmed and scared you all. It is really fun. You're gonna enjoy it, I promise. There will be weeks where you're like, I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall. How do I get through this? What is going on? But that's coding in general. Welcome to being a developer. There'll be times when you're beating your head against the wall and times when you're like, yes, it works. So, yeah. Any other questions? All right, let me just scroll through chat, make sure that there wasn't anything that I missed. Frank, are you okay? And is there anything that you want to add before I call it quits for the night?
Yeah, I'm okay. I actually was using the mentor link and it wasn't working. It was just saying I'm waiting. And then I was like, man. And then I did the student link, and then finally kicked me in maybe like at 8:30, but that's okay. Um, but you know, obviously you do this amazingly every time you do it. I know you answered all the apprentice questions. I know that's a lot of times people ask about that, but you know, you answered it great. Just like Mary Alice said, you have 8 weeks plus that 2 week, uh, holiday time. And the questions were answered about that, where you can, work part of that winter break. We give you a week per Thanksgiving, a week for Christmas. If you want to, like, I'll work half the week and the other half of the week I'll take off, that's great. Just obviously communication is key, like Mary Alice said. Make sure, like, your mentors and, your teammates know about that so you can kind of work together on that. So obviously communication is really important. Then after that 10 weeks, the 2 extra weeks you get, the career prep week kicks in. Lillian runs that, and you'll still be meeting with your team those last 2 weeks, but be no coding. It'll just be like conversations about like the next steps in your career, kind of not related to apprenticeship, just like in general, kind of like, how looking for jobs, how you would like work on your resume, LinkedIn, like general job search type questions, kind of separate from like, conversations about like possible apprenticeship. Okay. And also, like Marielle said, you have to apply to be an apprentice. There's a process where we evaluate all the apprentices, their evaluations from their peers and their mentors, their assessment scores, how they did in the classes. So, that takes a little time. I think Marielle maybe said like 2 to 3 weeks for that to decide. Once we select a group of people, we interview those people for the select openings we have. Every cohort, we have a different number of open spots. Some cohorts, sometimes we hire 3 or 4. Some we may hire like 10. It really depends. There is no like when people ask, well, how many are you going to hire? We really don't know. It does change every cohort. But we usually select probably close to 50% more of who we'll hire to do an interview, and then we narrow it down based upon the interview and our evaluation process. And then we'll usually let you know, within like 2 weeks or so, who we choose. I think that's pretty much, everything. Obviously, Mary Alice went through everything as well.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're around if you have questions. So just reach out to us on Slack if something comes up after the fact.